cybersecurity, the increasing cybersecurity threats during these post-COVID-19 times, and what should be the remedial measures. So we have representation today from both the law enforcement as well as the technology side and the security experts. So we have today on the panel Brijesh Singh, who is the Inspector General of Police with the government of Maharashtra right now. Brijesh has previously headed the cybersecurity department of Maharashtra, and he has also been the CISO for the entire Maharashtra state and in charge of the cybercrime division. And as one of his major successful implementations has been the crime criminal tracking and networking system, the CCTNS project for Maharashtra. So we will expect some valuable insights from Brijesh, especially from the law enforcement side on the cybercrime aspect. We have Nagendranath Kasinadhuni from Entity Security also today with us. He is more popularly known as Nagi. His current role is as a global technology partner relations in the CTO office of Entity Security and is based out of Singapore. Nagi has over 20 years of senior management experience in system integration, software services and consulting, and has been part of managed services, partner and alliance management, as well as creating solutions and services. We also have with us Bhavesh Pandey. Bhavesh is the CISO or the Chief Information Security Officer with Hero FinCorp currently. Bhavesh has joined Hero FinCorp I think a couple of years back and as the CISO. And previous to Hero FinCorp, he has been performing similar roles in managed information security in organizations such as Medicine, Videocon DTH, Religare, Wipro, amongst others. We also have Kanishk Gaur amongst us. Kanishk Gaur is the Director, Cybersecurity Advisory Practices with EY for India, Middle East, and Africa. And Kanishk has been associated with a technology as a technology leader with the EY for quite some time now, and he has advised in this capacity business leaders, CEO, and strategy officers and innovation officers. And he has also been heading the strategic direction and go-to-market strategy regarding cybersecurity for EY, British Chevening Commonwealth Fellow. Kanishk has undergone leadership training at UK's Royal Military College of Science also. So Khushbu is an advocate with Supreme Court, and she has been specializing in the cybercrime areas, and her other areas of specializations also include corporate crime, data privacy, insurance, banking, amongst others. Without any further ado, we will start with the questions.
Two, three things. One is that there is now very enhanced cooperation between, let's say, Interpol, United Nations Office on Drug and Crime, and CERTs and law enforcement. So while law enforcement role comes after an incident has happened and when investigation begins, but today law enforcement is at the forefront of various incidents where it is also disseminating critical advice about what kind of current threats which apply to your infrastructure. For example, this high contextuality of COVID-19. And various kind of advisories have been issued by Interpol. They have also been sent by Ministry of Home Affairs here to corporates and to law enforcement everywhere, so that adequate precautions can be taken, that one does not fall a victim to these ransomware attacks. Apart from that, in case of symmetric ransomware, where they have used symmetric encryption and the keys are known, and law enforcement everywhere is making these keys available. In case you can know what strain it is, then there are various places where law enforcement is also putting up these decryption keys, which you can use to decrypt your own data. Other than that, advice in the nature of cyber hygiene has been given, so as to prevent people from falling a prey to ransomware, because ransomware today is more complex. It is not just about encrypting systems. If you saw NotPetya was also a disk wiper, so it destroyed your systems. But today the newer ransomwares are also info stealers. So before encrypting, they are sending all your data, and then it gives a secondary leverage to the attacker. Then the attacker, on the information they possess. Nothing has been spared. In fact, the US institute where vaccine for COVID-19 is being developed was also encrypted with ransomware. I think in Paris, one hospital had to stop surgeries for certain hours because there was a ransomware attack. Prevention is better than cure. Guide your employees specifically against the kind of threat, the kind of vectors being used, the kind of emails, the particular indicator of compromise, particular kind of documents which are being used, the kind of themes that are being used in those documents. It may appear like an inline company communication or whatever. So you can take steps like DKIM and DMARC to protect your emails, but right from first protecting yourselves against any spear phishing attacks to having backups, having multiple backups, including offsite and cold backups from which you can restore your system. See, any backup from which you cannot quickly restore is of no use. So you would also have to stress test your systems and see whether you can actually restore from backups or not. Having said all this, first thing is prevention, sharing of threat intelligence, sharing of exact indicators of compromise, backups, cyber hygiene. This is what is being done. And if nothing works, then you can always come to law enforcement, but law enforcement is going to suggest you not to pay. That would be your personal call, whether how critical your informations are and whether you want to pay or not, or whether your information will be decrypted even after paying is a matter left to anybody's guess.
We do see crimes happening over, over internet or social media platforms or any other platforms online when it comes to fake information or misinformation, as we say. It's at the rampant stage, and almost all the government across the nation are fighting how to curb or how to control that. There should be, we have to make sure that there should be some mechanism to have with these platforms where government can have an automated access to unlawful content, to the resource of that content, and at the same time should have power to remove such content at the speed. Time becomes an essence when we talk about internet. So yes. The mechanism with social media platform, there has to be some mechanism with the government. At the same time, yes, evidence preservation should be part of it. There has to be evidence preservation, because even if you take down or even if you reach the person, at last, when it comes to court, it's a difficulty. It's difficulty to prove that. Now, at the same time, when we need intermediary laws, which I'm talking about, some mechanism, in absence of that law, also we have a lot of laws in Indian acts which do cater to spread of fake information or misinformation, as you say. Indian Penal Code do cater to some sections. We take it 5051, 5052, which specifically deals with punishment or for circulating any kind of rumor or report which can cause an alarm to specific society or the entire nation, or any of the any alarm in the public. We do have IT Act Section 6060, which specifically deals with that if you personate anybody using computer device or communication device or computer resource, yes, it's a punishable offense. Now, these punishments can go up to almost three years of imprisonment with fine. We do have Section 54. If you talk about the specific pandemic time, We do have Section 54 of Disaster Management Act. When I talk about personation, we see a lot of circulars coming, government circulars. We get screenshots of circulars, especially signed ones, that this has been now, this is the new thing, this has come from the bank, this has come from the government. So when we see all of, the general perception comes when we see a picture, when we see an exact circular, we tend to believe on that more than anything else, anybody writing it to us. So, this rumor mongers do play on that, do prey on that, and they send you those pictures. So when somebody impersonates, yes, it's a punishable offense. And especially at this time, even Section 188 of IPC, in consonance with Epidemic Act, gives you a punishment if you don't abide with any orders. Now, what more to be done? Yes, there should be something, Anti-Fake News Act should be in place. At the same time, this is a later stage. You might have recourse in the court, but then at the same time, the initial part comes as to do not fall prey for these things. I think Brijesh would be the better person how to check whether the information is correct or not, or how exactly you yourself can do a little bit of cross check. At the same time, do rely on the sources coming, do cross-check from the authentic sources, do not believe in any information coming from any place, do not click on any URLs coming to you, any lucrative offers coming to you, do not fall prey for it. At the same time, I would say that when it comes to court, yes, because as I said, the reach of the internet and the time it takes, it's so fast that even if the solution comes, it actually practically doesn't solve the purpose. So at the same time, I think we are waiting for the intermediary rules to come. February was the last that the parliament sat on it, that they should pass it. And that rule which is pending specifically gives the power, says that government should have a power to have access to all that data, access to the resource, and also remove it without court orders, because the moment you go for, it's not feasible to have court orders and everything. But yes, nonetheless, you do have court orders. Procedure.
First of all, hello to all the panelists as well. And I think Brijesh lined out exactly in principle what should be done, because prevention is always better than cure. And BCP, whatever function you do, security is a core business function really for any business now. It is like asking the oft-asked question, why are there brakes on a car? The brakes are on a car because the car can go fast, because with confidence that it can stop when it wants. Security is a bit like that. So with BCP, irrespective of what type of situation leads to a BCP, in this case, especially with COVID-19 as the case that we are looking at, the fact that most people don't go to their offices is what is really challenging for us. And I think there is more to do with having policies and strategy in place right from the beginning for the BCP, because security cannot be a bolt-on. Security cannot be an afterthought. Right? If you're thinking now, what should be the security? Probably we are sort of looking to close the doors of the stable after the horse is bolted. Security has to be part of the thinking for the BCP, and I'm sure Kanish will have something to add later on, given his role, or Bhavesh. To me, I think the framework that you were talking about, to have a framework, obviously there are guidelines from NIST that are very useful to have. There are 4 layers of guidelines, and you should first determine for your own organization where you're in those guidelines. And first understand what the rules of compliance are, what are your policies, how your vision and strategy is aligned to your business, what standards, how are you modeling your security postures, have you classified your data, is your data, whether it's people, whether it's loads, whether it's locations, have they been classified so that you know exactly what level of security to provide? Because end of the day, security is all about being prepared. There is no guarantee that you will never be impacted. The question is, how do I reduce that percentage of possibility that I will be compromised, and how quickly can I recover? The resilience part is as important as the preparation part. The resilience of coming back to as close to normalcy as possible. We are seeing, I think Brijesh has talked about how a lot of foreign actors now are very active in this COVID situation. organizations which are doing research in COVID are being attacked. I think Hijesh also talked about that. Hospitals, we are seeing even within our organization, we are helping hospitals because some hospitals have been challenged as well with these attacks. So a lot of things that are happening, and for us to be prepared, I think one is, critical organizations by themselves being prepared. But second is, as a BCP, as a measure of, working from other locations, using assets that are not necessarily tested by organizations before. Your home networks are all vulnerable. Your home PCs are vulnerable. There are many things that are vulnerable. So to make sure that your assets, which one so you protect and which ones you don't, and how do you strengthen the ones that people are using? How do you centralize some of them so that you can protect them better? And how do you train and educate your people? I think that is the most important part in BCP in this situation. Training and educating your staff, educate, make people aware, make them aware of not only the threats, but also of what tools, processes, what guidelines are there when they suspect something. How do you go back to the organization? These are all a very integral part, and training and practicing is important. I think Brijesh also raised this. You have to test yourself constantly to look for your vulnerabilities. And if you do all this, I think you can sort of have a reasonable level of confidence that in this situation, as people work from different places using different tools, different computing tools, etc., they can be better. But the most important thing is educate. And there are simple things, common sense things like, are your all patches up to date? Are you using the latest version of things? Are you using tools for the things they are supposed to be used? All these sort of things. And obviously, you talked about ransomware and others, and most of them, there is an investment in technology. But for me, technology is incidental. It is important. It's a hygiene factor. But operations and education and having policies in place and testing and practicing them is, I think, the most important.
First of all, good afternoon to everyone. And this situation throws a very unique and very complicated challenge to in front of all security professionals. So I will just go a little back. Like whenever we are designing or forming our security architecture, we never thought like one day a situation will come when everyone will be working from home, irrespective of their roles, but now there is a situation where everyone is working from home in a heterogeneous environment where everyone has a different kind of devices, different kind of network. When we have designed all our architecture, security architecture, we define that roles, allocated assets, their security architecture, related, all guidelines related to hardening according to their devices, roles, business environment, everything. Now, all these things have just changed immediately. So roles related to security professionals, CISOs, it's a huge challenge in front of us immediately. And other than that, then BCP to run our business. That's another dimension of all these things. So security, to improve our security in front of security environment, to improve our security related to all our devices, critical business process, critical information, and then to run your business. That's a unique challenge in front of us. Now that the second part of that question, like how CISOs are geared up and what we are doing to cope up with all these challenges. So first thing I will that day our honorable Prime Minister announced like we will be 100% that work from home from tomorrow onwards. That is, I think, 23rd in night. So suddenly the many things came in mind. Okay, so how people will log in? So we have anticipation like how our business will run. So we have started creating all remote users for all of remote access through VPN from 15 March onwards. Then suddenly one thing came in my mind. Now load on our VPN system, our remote login system. So that night I started testing our all system, like whether it can work on these environment. So Nagi just said like testing, and Mr. Brajesh also highlighted like testing of our system, testing of our environment. That is very important. So we started testing all of our component to run our business, and side by side how to secure our environment. Again here, because in this environment, phishing attacks is tenfold now. Cyber advisory from different source, whether from your security partners, whether from your security advisors, it's a tenfold, 20-fold even in security advisory. To implement all security advisory, 0 days attacks advisory, and then increase in cyber attack is giving nightmare to all security professionals. So our main work is to just to test all those testing advisory related solution first, and then implement, and side by side to educate all our users how to prevent phishing attacks, how to prevent, and don't fall in any trap. I always send a one-liner mail on daily basis, guys. Nothing is free in this world, not even a cup of tea. So if anyone is giving you 500 rupees coupon or 1000 rupees coupon or even 100 rupees coupon, they must want something from you, maybe your name or your email ID, and that may be worth of 102 rupees. That's why he's giving you 100 rupees worth of coupon. So education is very important. Be ready for your business, to run your business smoothly for BCP, and test your all, patches, your all advisory, and identify your vulnerabilities and secure your information. That is the first priority as of now. For CISOs, it's a endless task. We are on toes day and night.
Phishing, we have to understand what phishing really is. Phishing is not something which is very simple. There are 6 different kinds of phishing attacks which happen. The first and foremost is the deceptive phishing attack, where we see that the email ID from which the mail is being sent, that gets compromised. And most common typo is people will change some part of the letter, and the user who is receiving it is not able to identify. So people would look out and appear that this is coming from a legitimate source. So this is something called as deceptive phishing. Now this is the most common example. The PayPal scam which happened some time back was example of deceptive phishing. The next one, which is much more focused, is primarily spear phishing. Now spear phishing is much more targeted, where most commonly people are sent information on social media sites, and they appear to come from a recognized sender. So it will appear to come from a company, or it will appear to come from somebody who's personalized. And what you could typically do to prevent spear phishing based attacks is that you need to have more training for your employees. You can do training awareness campaigns. You can limit the sharing of sensitive personal information. You'll have to have build programs to have privacy and security built in. And then you can also invest in automated solutions to analyze emails. So some of the automated solutions that typically you could use could be, you can use Memcached, Snort, Wireshark, Cloudfish, Netgraph extensions. So you can create some of these. Then there are different phishing tools which could use primarily, to protect your browsers against phishing attacks. So the next access is to CEO-based frauds, where you would see that the emails will come, say, from top management, and they will ask one of the vendors to make a payment to a service provider, and but the details will be something which will be different. So what you can do is you need to create employee awareness trainings. You need to carry out awareness trainings for your people, that once they receive anything which is sensitive from primarily a top management, then something like that needs to be, they need to cross-verify some of those information.
there aren't any real-time mechanism of coordination and of content filtering which alert us to this kind of content. The effects are visible only when something happens on the ground. Now, it's a thin line when we expect the state to prevent harm, and then to prevent this harm, you would need to have mechanisms which continuously sort of scrape and search the web for this kind of information. It here also borders on some kind of surveillance. It will be alleged that this is a state surveillance on social media. But to prevent harm, you have to prospectively identify what is harmful. It may be regarding child porn, it may be regarding revenge porn, it may be terrorist propaganda. But there needs to be built in place a mechanism where this is prospectively identified. And here, platforms need to take liability. They need to ensure with the state that the commercial service which they are providing for profit does not result into harm to the vulnerable. So there are various kind of sections against which mass protests may be organized or violence may be orchestrated using these platforms. So here we need a real-time mechanism of identifying this content, and then a real-time mechanism also to take up this kind of complaints with these platforms, either block them, take them down, preserve the evidence, or do all what is legally necessary to prevent harm, including identifying the perpetrators by conducting forensics. This again is difficult because if you go to any of these platforms, they talk about them being subject to only two things: their company policies and Section 230C of the Communications Decency Act of the US. The Communications Decency Act of the US actually gives them a carte blanche. It's absolutely free of any kind of civil and criminal liability. However, in India, we have intermediary guidelines which provide them a safe harbor subject to certain conditions, which then comes to the point of view of removal of this content. But the removal time is still broadly around 3 days. You know, in times where people can gather within hours, a content removal of 3 days does not seem to be a sufficient enough measure which can help us curb these crimes in real time. Fact-checking services have emerged, which are very helpful. World over, fact-checking services are working. Google has started a fact-checking service. Facebook has started a fact-checking service. Similarly, limitations on forwarding have come. Now, at the request of the Indian government, WhatsApp is allowing only one forward. Earlier, it was restricted to 5. So there are a lot of measures in place. Law enforcement has been continuously giving this feedback. It has also been monitoring the web for content which may create social contagion. However, the amount of information is very large. It requires very large compute. It also requires a large trained staff, and it requires an excellent real-time coordination between law enforcement, these platforms, ISPs, TSPs, and at times in a judiciary. So with jurisdictional arbitrage, judicial systems are very different in various countries. Legal systems are very different, and hence content hosted outside becomes difficult to be tracked, to be brought down, or even to, if you want to locate the perpetrator behind that, it becomes very, very difficult. So it is a question which we are grappling with. But I think in the coming days, there are across world, there are legislative measures like a new German net law. Apart from that, some states in US are also coming up with amendments to the 230 of the Communications Decency Act, wherein there would be some liability on these platforms. But it is time that these platforms sit across and talk and help the governments to prevent harm from reaching vulnerable populations. In terms of school, which is again a vulnerable population, you see that there are ages for joining everything, like social media. So in case of a minor, any contractual consent cannot be given by minors. So no terms of service actually apply to a minor, because a minor is not capable of, a minor below 13 years is not capable of signing a contract and not capable of giving any consent. But having said so, now almost all children that we know are digitally literate and they are using some social media of some other kind. This has also led them positively to adapt to better means of education, like Google Classroom, or today as we see video conferencing in times of lockdown has offered a chance to take virtual classes. But this is also leading to various things wherein misconfigured Zoom classes, somebody has entered and then Zoom bombing, put out things which were pornographic in nature. Some kind of cyber literacy is essential. So to children, one should talk, one should tell them what to share, what not to share, what is the extent of sharing.
We do have laws that do cater to the crimes we are talking about. It's just the new modus operandi. But yes, whereas current situation is concerned, we do need right to privacy, privacy related more equipments. We need how to enforce it. We do need data localization. The RBI circular talking about all the financial institutions to have their data being stored in India was one of the welcoming move, because if these crimes do happen over there, the problem comes with the law enforcement agencies is that I do have law in place, but I do not have a system to enforce it. And it becomes, it serves no purpose that you do have law but you can't enforce those. So yes, we do have evidence preservation is one. The second, yes, jurisdiction plays a very important role over here. There's a need when it comes to jurisdiction, because when we talk about crime over internet, it's actually fenceless. There is no jurisdiction that comes in place over here. So even I mean, Brijesh was just talking about national level integration when it comes to jurisdiction. I'm talking about the state level also. We do have problem when it comes to interstate jurisdiction issues when such crimes which actually doesn't have any jurisdiction come in play. At the same time, yes, when we talk about financial institutions, we did cater to that, have data stored in India, because whenever you ask any of these entities, they simply say that no, we are not governed by your law. We have our data stored over there. There's a different policy. They do. I think their company policy is above, as Brijesh was saying, is above my laws. So yes, these are the few things. At the same time, evidence preservation, whereas electronic evidence preservation is one challenge which is being faced, because even if LEA somehow reaches the preservation, the guideline is not intact, it's growing. So yes, there has to be a proper guideline when it comes to evidence preservation. And what else? I mean, I think that should be suffice. We do have law. I do say that we have a law. Implementation is a bigger challenge.
I'll also let Bhavesh speak about it later, because I think he's a CISO as well. So, but from my point of view, I think the building block that you have today is your home. That's where people are working from. And the devices, like he said also, and I think you mentioned the word heterogeneous, so everybody's using different devices. I think there's a great need not only to use some of the tools that Kanishk has mentioned as a part of your IT infrastructure, security infrastructure, but more importantly, I think your home infrastructure has to be hardened as well. I've seen our own clients where I work, asking us to provide for equipment, provide for guidance, provide for scripts, etc., to harden home networks. One of the biggest challenges people have in working from home is many of the home, the wireless networks, the routers, etc., are very vulnerable. They are not even patched properly. They don't have the latest patch. They are all got, I think any one of us can crack into anybody's home router with ease, because the username passwords never change. They're all probably defaults everywhere, etc. So there's a lot of things that need to be corrected. In fact, clients today are giving away home bundles, office bundles, to say, use this in your home network. Just like they give you a headset or they give you a laptop now, that's becoming an important part as well. But outside of this, I think we have to go back to first principles, Rajneesh. First principles are all about what is it that you're trying to protect? Where is it? Who is using it? What is its value? And how do you want to make sure that you protect? And how do you know it's protected? Your governance, risk, and compliance become important, right? And the fact that you're always testing your own infrastructure vulnerability is very important as well. So for me, I think coming to this, and of course, there are a few guidelines as well, right? First of all, you should know what your assets are. Today, the challenge is because people are working from home and other places, you are dependent on assets that were not provided by the organization. But I think it's important to know what your assets are. You need to harden everything. I think Brijesh mentioned that as well. You need to harden everything, make sure that everything is up to date and up to speed. whatever patches are required have to be done as well. There have been enough cases with big companies where some patches which are, which have been released by the vendors even 4 years ago have not been done, because these were all seen as important but not urgent in the past, but now it's becoming very critical. Of course, you have to start from your coding, you have to code securely, etc., etc. You asked me to be brief, so I'm going to stop now, and maybe if some of the other panelists want to join and add to this, that may be useful.
My opinion is security is it's a culture of the environment, of the organization, or any organization. So automating one process of security is possible, but when you say automating complete security operation or complete security environment, I don't think it's a feasible, or it doesn't or right, because security of the organization involves in each and every aspect. So when you say securing rights management or user onboarding, that's a possible. So through identity and access management, that is very important tool in automating one of the process of information security. That is very important. Identity and access management is very important for BFSI, banking, and rather all big organizations. That is very important, where not only related to security, even this is a compliance requirement also for onboarding, deboarding, single sign-on, and rights management periodically. This is very important tool. So this is one of the I think I said like a regulatory requirement to implement identity and access management in banking, and especially in BFSI sector. But automating security environment, I don't think this is required. To implement or to make a culture of security is very important. To each and every department, resources, assets, everything having some kind of security, involvement. Whether you have off-role employee, on-role employee, top management, middle management, everybody has to contribute in security and compliance. So you cannot automate these things. Yes, you have to aware all these, section of people in your organization, how important security is for your organization. So in multiple sessions, I used to say one line, look, business survival depends on information security. If a single breach, that can let down entire organization. So automating, security process, it can be done, and it's a very important to implement solutions like identity and access management. But automating entire security is, I don't think this is a right approach.
Work from home, we have to look at aspects to find out what is your digital footprint, right? So finding out our organization's digital footprint is very important, and then looking at aspects such as shadow IT, your SSL, what are your exposed services. These play a vital role. The next aspect is with respect to brand. A lot of brands have become truly digital today. So looking at how your social media is being managed, what are the threats to your social media, your WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram handles, your mobile applications. Now your mobile applications are more susceptible. So looking at your mobile applications, your web applications is very much important. Then you have to look at components primarily where you have to find out what has been already been breached. So looking at information leakage. So aspects, finding out, going to dark web, finding out your breach credentials or doing doc searches on Google Docs, that is important. So, for doing all this, it's very important you take care of your domains, your IPs, your exposed services, your mail servers, your name servers, looking at finding out what domains could be more vulnerable, and also keeping a tab of social media. What kind of sentiment is there about you within the social media is important. So if I have to summarize this, you have to carry out a digital risk assessment, to find out what all are the risks your organization is having today, and also look at doing threat hunting to look at insider threats and doing elements of cyber threat intelligence which could potentially find out indicators of compromise for you.
Let me clarify that the Arogya Setu is neither compulsory nor has it been hacked. So Arogya Setu is fine. It has not been hacked. It is not compulsory. In fact, there is a strong misinformation which is being created about this app. It is very surprising that we have two kinds of yardsticks. One we apply to government apps, and the other we absolutely do not apply to all the apps which we gleefully give our rights away to. So a request would be to, in fact, refer to some articles which have been jointly written by me and Khushbu also on the privacy principles as applicable to Arogya Setu. And we find that the app takes only limited information. It does not send the information to the server. It only sends a hash of the information. And only when a medically significant event occurs, then the information is sent up. Apart from that, there's a sunset clause. It limits collection, and it also tells that it will not be shared with anybody else. So about Arogya Setu, let me say that there is a misinformation campaign, and we should take time to educate people that this is a measure. It's a public health and safety measure, and that we need to rather than thinking that it is compulsory, there is no compulsion on anybody to download Arogya Setu app. I'm very sure many of you do not have that app, but please be careful about your own health and be also responsible towards your families and others, because what the app will tell you is only the situation where probably you have been, your health has been breached or there is a possibility of you becoming positive. Having said this, coming to government sector, see, in government, the responsibility of a CISO is much more because you're dealing with public data. Sometimes I do contend that the understanding of technology within the government may not be as good as what it is in the free private sector. And there may be a limitation on resources also. But having said so, some people have been doing wonderful work. Like I've also worked with Anish, where they have been bringing in industry experience to tell us how to improve our systems. Plus, we remain in touch with freelance researchers. There are a lot of people who send us proofs of concepts and vulnerabilities and sort of proof of concept of hacks that lead to leakage of public information and data from our sites and our apps. But the thing is that eternal vigilance is needed. Eternal vigilance is needed. Similarly, the government should up its game by designing apps which are much more secure than those are used in the private sector. Because if in a fiduciary relationship or otherwise in a corporate space, it's just a breach of a contract. But with the state, it is different. The state is a custodian of citizens' right, and it is bound on duty to protect the rights of its citizens. So I think a greater amount of vigilance has to be exercised by those in the government. They have to bring in security by design, and they have to ensure that they are very careful about any possibilities of security breaches. So they need to learn what infrastructure they are operating, continuously find if there are any 0 days or any vulnerabilities which have been put there in the wild, and also have a system of continuously hardening your infrastructure. So this needs to be done. Coming to e-com and other things, I have always said this, it's a bit harsh to say that you provided that app, right? It's your company which provided me that app. If I'm keeping my money or my information on that app, it is your responsibility, because you said that you download this app and you transact with this. You may be anybody, you may be an aggregator, you may be whosoever you are. But if your motive is profit, you have to understand that you are also liable if this data is breached. Somewhere within some time, we will have the personal data protection regulation in India. The bill has been tabled in the parliament, and soon it will be a reality. It is going to be as stringent as the GDPR, where you can be fined up to 4% of your overall earnings, even for a single breach. So it is time that especially financial apps, fintech banks, they up their game. They introduce security by design. They get to secure coding. They should continuously stress test their framework. They should do red teaming. They should have continuous threat hunting. They should look for threat intelligence. Similarly, they should look at better and better frameworks which have privacy built in, like encryption of the data from the go, encryption of data in rest, encryption of data in motion. Also, in case of any breach, then they should have a breach protocol as to how you would notify people, How would you compensate them? What are the legal liabilities you would face? So this all needs to be done. I think somewhere we do not have compulsory reporting norms. We will need to have compulsory reporting norms. And then we have to be eternally vigilant about, if we are hosting any critical information infrastructure, we have to be eternally vigilant about the rights of the people who are using it. So it again basically comes to principles of cyber hygiene applied to various scenarios. For an individual, it can be an awareness about not clicking links, not downloading anything, not forwarding anything, not falling a prey to phishing and vishing attacks and social engineering. At the enterprise, it may be backups, secure configurations, alerting your employees, finding out where your key assets are, properly hardening them, looking out for information in the darknet or other places where your vendor data or your customer data is being leaked. So depending upon the kind of infrastructure, your security posture would be configured. And I think it is time that we do these tabletop exercises, try and understand and instill a sense of security in everyone. So while you're working at home, every day the company should send some security awareness material to people, so that right from video conferencing to using company email and other collaboration platforms, one should not become a victim, or one should not become a cause from which somebody is pivoting and compromising the company infrastructure as a whole. So it's time to be very careful, because this is a time when there's too much load on company resources and the internet, and on any kind of platforms. They're being stress tested. People are very vulnerable to social engineering operations due to COVID. It's an unnatural situation where people have been logged in and working from homes. It's time to be more vigilant. It's time to be cyber aware. It's time to practice better cyber hygiene.
When we talk about data privacy bill, yes, it's pending from very long. There is a need, there's a requirement for data privacy bill to come in place. We do have IT Act, we do have safeguards, we do have guidelines under IT Act 79, which specifically provides that in case of any kind of breach, who is liable and what due process one has to follow. And in the same time, Section 43 also applies on us, that in case of breach, yes, there would be a liability, there would be penalty imposed on you. But yes, there are a lot of ambiguity when it comes to that also, because only when there is a financial loss due to that breach is when one can impose such sections. But yeah, looking at GDPR, looking at UK data protection bill, looking at others, yes, our critical data are, I think there was a case not less than a year back, that one of our hospitals in India, almost 1 million of patients' data was leaked. It was available on internet, and I think one of the German company was the one. German CERT was the one to talk about that. Okay, the data was to an extent that medical scans, patients' detail, which doctor was there, all of those data was available online. So and if you look at the kind of security, whereas we are concerned, yes, we are still at the nascent stage when it comes to security, cyber security at our organizations, and organizations such as critical as, I mean, it can be anything. It can disrupt your entire business to an extent that there can be a revenue loss, have impact as to your reputation, your productivity can be at the halt. So if any such kind of threat happens, I think there has already been discussion as to what measure one should take when it comes to protection. But at the same time, yes, if you look at the current data protection bill which is pending, it clearly mentions that in case of breach, yes, there is a mandatory clause over there, as Brijesh, that there is a need. Yes, there is a mandatory clause that in case of any kind of breach, it's mandatory for the company to inform the data protection officer about that within the time frame. And in case of breach by due to your own, if the liability comes on you, then yes, the penalty can go up to 2% to 4% of your global turnover. So this is there in Indian laws also. So looking at that, yes, but then current law also talks about that. and at the same time what exactly one should do, whereas today's condition is concerned in the absence of data protection bill also, that yes, when you have all your entire SOPs when it comes to any kind of breach happens, as to patch the vulnerability, see the system, the critical system, remove that, inform your entire organization about it or the key personnel about it, have an SOP, do engage your forensics, internal or external. But at the same time, I would say that do have preservation when it comes to when you do your forensics, get the preservation done, because the penalty, the imposition of penalty would be proved with regard to whether the breach has happened at whose end. So yes, at that time you need to have all your system intact. Whether as of now, whether to go on litigation or not also can be dependent on how much, to what level the breach has happened. And also information, I think if today's condition, if we look into the current IT Act and the guidelines, looking at how much users data is the breach of how much data of a user is at stake is depending on that. You can take a call whether to inform about that or not, and at the same time whether you want to take a litigation against the breach that has happened.
It's not so much a recommendation. We have to live with the laws of the land. And most businesses adapt to it if you want to survive in that market. For example, Indonesia has a data sovereignty law that says that data has to reside in that country. It doesn't matter who you are. If you want to do business in Indonesia and if you've got a digital business, you have to make sure your data sovereignty rules apply to that country. Brijesh mentioned about GDPR, and the whole world is sort of following GDPR. I think the gray areas will remain. I'm not a legal expert to talk about gray areas. Khushbu has already mentioned some of them earlier, so I'll not talk about it. But generally, as a business, as you're planning your business, the most important thing to remember is that if you want to do a business in the country, you have to do according to the laws of the country and you have to comply. And the most important thing is the size of the big markets is big enough that most of the hyperscalers are providing residency of their infrastructure in those geographies. If you look at the number of places there are POPs from Microsoft or Google or those sort of Amazons today, they're increasing by leaps and bounds because they know that it's important to comply locally. Other than other things around technology, things like response times, etc. So to me, I don't think there is a from a security point of view, though, because you raised the question of security. Security is global; it's not local. Because the threat actors are very smart, they've upped their game, they're investing heavily into the business. In fact, 50%, 51% of all security threats today are on the application and not on the infrastructure. They are using a lot of automation and machine learning. In fact, 1% of all malware is actually around vulnerability scanning in the devices they've entered. So they're actually scanning for more vulnerabilities after they come in. So there is so much of, so security is not regional, security is not local, security is always global. And we are seeing where the threat actors are coming from. They can be anywhere in the world and they attack somebody else. So I don't believe, one is around doing business, and there the important thing is to comply with what the laws of the land are and to make sure you give the confidence to your client that you are able to serve them to the best of your ability within the limitations of the rules of that country. But security is definitely global. There is nothing about security that you will have to pay the price for it. Let me tell you this, the bad actors, I'm stressing again, they've upped their game so much, they're investing heavily into this business, probably a lot more than what Bhavesh is investing or gets as budgets for his company, right? That's how it is. That's the reality of the situation. So we have to be always vigilant.
Yeah, I agree with you. So security is not local, it's a global. And as far as compliance are concerned, for this, when RBI is given this regulation, like all this financial data will be stored in India only for banks. That's it. That is not mandatory for NBFC like us, but we started following that compliance from very first day. So whenever we do any kind of contract with either AWS or Azure or even Salesforce has no data center or POP in in India, but they promise like by March 2020 they will have their center in India. So I agree with you. Like if you have to do business in India, you have to follow law of the land, and the compliance or regulators recommendation you have to follow. Or as far as vulnerabilities are concerned, I think I missed that last point to reply you. Like as of now, the most vulnerable part is end user machines. That's a very vulnerable, because as Nagi said, like we don't know like how our user is connecting, either through their mobile hotspot or any Wi-Fi hotspot that is active in their nearest mall or in nearest railway station hotspot or anywhere. So the biggest threat is as of now how your user is connecting to your application, how your user is accessing your application. So daily basis, awareness mailer we used to send how to connect your application. So awareness is very important related to information security as of now.
Thank you. We have absolutely run out of time. I'd like to thank each of the panelists again. And as we mentioned, this whole thing has been recorded live on Facebook also, and we will have the on-demand video available on our CXO TV website as well as on YouTube. And I will share the video link with each of the panelists. Thanks again for a very insightful session. We hope we have covered most of the aspects, and I would ask all of you to stay safe in the current times. And thanks again for the webinar today. Thank you.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.